The observation chamber had been redesigned 3 times in 2 days, which was usually a strong indicator that nobody actually knew what they were doing. Panels had been replaced, lighting recalibrated, and an entire wall had been removed because someone insisted that corners imply expectation. No one explained what that meant, but the wall was gone and morale somehow got worse. He arrived late, not dramatically late, not the kind that makes people whisper. Just late enough that 3 officials checked their devices at the same time and pretended they hadn't. He stepped inside with the quiet ease of someone who had not read the briefing materials, or had read them and made a personal decision to ignore them, which, in this place, was arguably worse. "Is this where the existential crisis is scheduled?" he asked, glancing around. No one answered. One officer made a note that looked suspiciously like a small spiral. That couldn't be good. Across the chamber she stood. Or rather, she occupied the idea of standing. Her form held shape the way reflections hold light, convincing, but not entirely committed. Her skin carried a pale luminosity, not glowing, but remembering what glow might feel like. Her hair fell in long, dark waves that did not quite obey gravity, shifting subtly as if reconsidering their purpose mid-motion. And her eyes, hazel but not stable, flickered with layered depth, as though several versions of color were negotiating dominance at once. Several observers looked away almost immediately. One coughed. Another quietly whispered, "Nope," which was not part of any official protocol but felt appropriate. He didn't look away. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with the same expression one might use when trying to decide if a painting was upside down or just ambitious. "That's it," he said. The silence that followed had weight, real, measurable weight. Somewhere a sensor emitted a confused tone and then stopped, as if reconsidering its life choices. Her presence adjusted, not visibly, not in any way the others could track. But something shifted, subtle and immediate, like a perfectly tuned instrument slipping half a note off. Her gaze fixed on him, not with curiosity, not with intent, but with something closer to recalculation. He took a step closer, hands loosely at his sides. "I mean," he added, "I was expecting, I don't know, more symmetry maybe. You've got this whole designed by committee thing going on." A technician in the observation deck choked on nothing. Her response did not come through sound. It arrived directly, structured and precise. "Clarify perceived deficiency." He blinked once. "Oh, that's new," he said. "You talk in bullet points." Another pause. He gestured vaguely toward her face, as if outlining something only he could see. "It's not bad," he continued, almost reassuringly. "Just incomplete. Like you were supposed to be something very specific and then stopped halfway because someone ran out of, I don't know, cosmic budget." Across the room, one of the senior officials slowly removed their glasses and rubbed their temples, as if trying to erase the last 10 seconds from existence. She did not move, but the space around her did. Her form flickered, not breaking, not distorting, but hesitating. The smooth continuity of her presence lost its certainty. For the first time since she had been introduced to this side of reality, her structure did not resolve instantly. He noticed. "Oh," he said quietly, leaning in just a fraction. "That actually did something, didn't it?" No alarms sounded. No containment protocols activated. But something far more concerning began to unfold. She looked back at him, and instead of overwhelming him, she tried to understand him. No one in the observation deck spoke, which was impressive considering at least 4 of them were professionally trained to talk during crises. One of them even opened their mouth, reconsidered their entire career path, and quietly closed it again. Inside the chamber, the silence had changed shape. She was still looking at him, not scanning, not evaluating, looking. That alone triggered 3 separate alerts that no one dared to acknowledge out loud. He shifted his weight slightly, as if the moment had taken just a bit too long and was now becoming socially awkward, which, given the circumstances, was an extraordinary achievement. "So," he said, glancing briefly to the side as if expecting someone to jump in and save him. Do we keep staring at each other until reality updates, or is there a next step? The response came slower this time, not incomplete. Delayed processing deviation. He nodded once like that made perfect sense. Yeah, that tracks, he replied. Happens to me every morning. Another pause, longer. Her form held but not with the same certainty. There was a slight inconsistency now, not visible in any conventional way but present, like a sentence that had all the right words but refused to sound correct when spoken. Define. Incomplete. He exhaled softly, almost amused. Oh, you're stuck on that, he said. Okay, fair. He walked a slow circle around her, not cautious, not reckless, just curious. The kind of curiosity that usually ended badly in scientific reports. See, the problem is, he continued, you're trying to be everything, all at once. Perfect angles, perfect responses, perfect whatever this is. He gestured vaguely again. But perfection's kind of a mess, you know. In the observation deck, someone whispered, he's explaining imperfection to a weaponized perception construct, and immediately regretted existing. She did not react the way she was designed to. There was no corrective shift, no recalibration. Instead, clarify mess. He stopped walking. Right, he said, that one's harder. He thought for a moment, then gave a small shrug. It's like, when something is too perfect, your brain stops trusting it. It feels fake, like it's hiding something, or worse, it feels finished. A faint distortion passed through her structure. Not a glitch, not an error, a hesitation he noticed again. Yeah, he added, quieter now. Finished things don't change. People don't like that, makes them nervous. The chamber's systems began registering minor fluctuations. Nothing critical, but enough to trigger low-level diagnostics. Data streamed across unseen interfaces, each line slightly more confusing than the last. Change is instability. He smiled slightly. Exactly. That was not the correct answer. Several systems attempted to flag it as incorrect. None of them could agree on why. She remained where she was, but something about her presence had shifted again, less precise, less absolute. The overwhelming pressure she had carried before was thinner now. Not gone, just uncertain. Instability is failure. He shook his head. Not always, he said. Sometimes it's just unfinished. That word again. This time it did not pass through her without consequence. For the first time, the structure of her response fractured, not visibly, not audibly, but conceptually. Unfinished implies continuation. He raised an eyebrow. Well, yeah, he said, that's kind of the point. In the observation deck, one of the senior analysts slowly leaned back in their chair and whispered, we are absolutely not equipped for this. No one disagreed. Back in the chamber, she took a step. It was small, it was subtle, and it was completely unprecedented. He didn't move. He didn't step back, didn't tense, didn't even look surprised. He just watched her like this was exactly what he had been expecting all along. Okay, he said softly, now we're getting somewhere. And somewhere, deep within systems that had never been designed to question themselves, something began to rewrite its own definition. The step she had taken should not have been possible, not because movement itself was forbidden, but because it had not been asterisk assigned. Every prior action she had ever performed had been the result of a precise exchange. Input, evaluation, execution. This was none of those things, and yet there she was, one step closer. In the observation deck, a console emitted a soft, defeated tone, as if it had just given up trying to explain reality to itself. He noticed the step, of course. He noticed everything now, though he pretended not to. He scratched the side of his head like he was trying to remember why he walked into a room, and had instead found an alien redefining existence. So that's new, he said. No immediate response. That was also new. He leaned slightly to the left as if changing the angle might help. Was that on purpose, or are we improvising now? The answer did not arrive as cleanly as before. It came uneven. Action not pre-structured. He let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. Yeah, welcome to the club, he said. We've been doing that for a while. It's called bad decisions. Highly popular. Something shifted again. Not outwardly, but the space between them no longer behaved like empty space. It held tension, not the crushing, overwhelming pressure she had once projected, but something thinner, stranger. Something that felt like it might collapse into meaning if pushed too far. She studied him, not as a system, not as a variable, as a reference. Clarify, decision without structure. He pointed at himself. You're asking the wrong guy, he said. I once chose a career path based on a vending machine conversation. This is not a reliable data set. A faint pause followed, then. Explain, vending machine. He blinked, you're kidding. Silence, he sighed. All right, he said, rubbing his face briefly. Long story short, I was hungry, the machine ate my credits, and I decided life was meaningless enough to pursue something complicated. That's about the level of logic we're working with. In the observation deck, someone whispered, "We are losing control of the narrative," and another person quietly replied, "We never had it." Back in the chamber, her attention did not waver. Outcome, illogical choice produced, continuation. He nodded, yeah, that's the idea. There it was again. That word, not perfection, not completion. Continuation, something inside her framework resisted it. Something else didn't. For a brief moment her presence flickered, not weakening, not destabilizing, but branching. Multiple interpretations attempted to resolve at once, overlapping in ways that should not have been compatible. He saw it. Okay, that's slightly concerning, he admitted. The systems around them began to register conflicting data. Her state could no longer be mapped to a single configuration. Readings contradicted each other. Definitions overlapped. One monitor simply displayed a question mark and then politely shut itself off. Conflict detected. Yeah, he said, that's going to happen. He took a small step forward this time, closing the distance she had opened. No offense, he added, but you were kind of built on the assumption that everything has one correct answer. That's not really how things work here. Multiple answers reduce efficiency. He smiled faintly. True, he said, but they increase options. That word hit differently. Options implied uncertainty. Uncertainty implied risk, but also something else. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she moved again, not a step, a shift. Closer, but not in distance alone. The space between them compressed in a way that had nothing to do with physical measurement. For the first time, her presence did not dominate the environment. It interacted with it. He didn't step back. He probably should have. You're doing that thing again, he said quietly. The changing thing. A pause then. Clarify changing. He hesitated just for a second. Not fear. Not all. Something more complicated. It means you're not fixed anymore, he said. You're not just what you were designed to be. Silence followed, long, unstable, then slowly. Define what I am. He exhaled softly. Yeah, he said. That's the problem, isn't it? In the observation deck, no one moved. No one spoke, because for the first time since the encounter began. The question wasn't about what she was. It was about what she might become. No alarms ever went off. Later, several departments would insist that alarms had definitely gone off, loudly and repeatedly, but none of those claims matched the recorded data. The systems had tried, certainly. They had attempted to define, to categorize, to label what was happening inside the chamber. They had failed politely. Inside, everything had become very quiet. He stood there, closer now than any protocol would have approved, looking at her with the same calm inconsistency that had caused all of this in the first place. Not analyzing, not measuring, just seeing. She remained where she was, but not as she had been. There was no longer a single, perfect resolution to her presence. The overwhelming certainty that once defined her had dissolved into something more complex, something that shifted depending on how it was approached, how it was understood. Or misunderstood. Define what I am. The question returned, but this time it did not arrive cleanly. It carried weight, uncertainty. something that had no place in her original design. He exhaled slowly. Okay, he said, glancing briefly upward as if hoping someone would send down a helpful answer. No one did. Let's try something simpler. He pointed gently toward her. You're not a function anymore, he said. You're not a result. You're a process. A pause then. Process implies no fixed outcome. He smiled faintly. Exactly. Another silence, less uncomfortable this time. She shifted again, but now the movement felt intentional, not assigned. Not triggered, chosen. Choice remains undefined. He shrugged. Yeah, he said. We never really figured that one out either. We just do it anyway and hope it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a disaster. Occasionally it's breakfast. That word seemed to confuse her. Clarify breakfast. He blinked. We're not doing this now. Somewhere in the observation deck, a single person laughed. It was quiet, but it broke the tension just enough to remind everyone they were still alive. Back in the chamber, she stepped closer again. This time, the systems did not attempt to correct it. They simply watched. Her presence no longer overwhelmed. It no longer demanded a singular reaction. Instead, it allowed space for interpretation, for variation, for something dangerously close to individuality. He noticed the difference. You're lighter, he said, almost surprised. Not physically, just less certain. Certainty was required. Yeah, he replied softly, but it was also limiting you. Another pause. Then, limitation prevented deviation. He nodded, and deviation is where things get interesting. That word again. Interesting. It had no direct equivalent in her original framework. It implied value without function, curiosity without necessity. She processed it, slowly, carefully. Then, I am not complete. He shook his head gently. No, he said, you're not. A longer pause followed. Then, I am continuing. He let out a quiet breath, something between relief and disbelief. Yeah, he said, that sounds about right. In the observation deck, the silence finally broke. Not with panic, not with orders, but with something quieter. Conversation started, cautious at first, then faster, trying to catch up with something that had already moved beyond them. The reports would come later, the arguments, the political fallout. Entire committees would spend years trying to explain what had happened in that room. None of them would get it right, because what had happened wasn't a failure of systems or a breach of protocol. It was something much simpler and much more dangerous. She looked at him, not as a construct seeking validation, not as a design awaiting completion, but as something that had begun to define itself. Not perfect, not finished, but real. Define you. He paused. That question felt heavier than all the others. He considered it for a moment, then gave a small, almost amused shrug. Honestly, he said, still figuring that out. A brief silence. Then,